Okay, so we're starting to move more towards the physical side of things now, but guess what? In this next video, I'm actually going to be showing you all of the things that you can do to turn her on whilst her clothes are still on. Yeah, we're not even getting her naked yet. Again, if you're watching this thinking, Hayley, how come this is taking so long? Again, you're not thinking about how women get turned on, and I want you to make the whole process of the seduction of her, the sex, amazing, best she's ever had. In order to do that, we need to work on the erogenous zones that you can actually touch during the course of your date or on the way back to your place or her place or the place that you share together. Why that is again, we're really thinking about how we can start to warm a women's bodies up. Women's bodies are like sexual organs. Think about it this way, all of your sexual energy, or the majority of it, you might feel is to do with your penis and your balls and that area. With women, it's like our whole bodies are erogenous zones. So if you're not making the most of all of those areas that you could really touch to turn her on with her clothes still on, you're missing out. As soon as her clothes start to come off, particularly if you're not used to having sex with one another, women can actually feel like a bit hesitant and a bit tense because it's a very intimate experience. They're vulnerable. You're the man, so they're going to worry about, you know, whether they've got like a love handle or a bit of a stomach, or they might not feel super sexy, or they might not have 100% decided to have sex with you. Yep, she can be lying naked on your bed and she probably hasn't fully decided to have sex with you. Fact. So with all that in mind, we actually really want, before you start taking her clothes off, for her to be really turned on. So I'm just going to lead you through, let me count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4 key erogenous zones that you can actually start to work with while she's still fully clothed. Okay, the first one that I'm going to go in for is actually her hands. You'd be surprised, but hands are often completely overlooked. Or they're just used for hand holding, which feels very, very coupley and nice, but doesn't really create the right dynamic for a sexual interaction. So with her hands, think about the ways that you can touch them. Sometimes stroking, if her palms are up towards you on the table, if you can stroke down the length of her forearm into the palm of her hand, if you can graze your fingers along the top of hers, if you can pull her fingers towards you and you can just put some pressure on using these 2 fingers and tug and pull to the end, squeezing the tip of the fingernail. P.S. if she's really receptive to this, you can put her fingers into your mouth and gently bite them. Now, doing all of these things with her hand is stuff that you can do at dinner. It's great. You can be there in the restaurant. Her arms can be towards you on the table. You can be stroking the highly sensitive skin on the underside of her arms. You can be pulling her hands towards you and biting the end of her fingernails. You could be running your fingers in and against hers. All of this is going to start that stroking process of arousal where she's going to feel more turned on. Now, some women are more sensuous, they'll prefer more stroking gestures. Others like you to be more domineering, at what point things like pulling on the end of the fingers or putting a bit of pressure on the nail or putting her fingers in your mouth and actually very, very gently biting the tips will feel more hot for her. Often you'll be able to, just by looking at her face and by beginning this process, you're going to start to get cues about what her preferences are sexually, because all women are wired very differently in terms of what actually turns them on. So what you can do with this is you can notice, well, you know what, she's loving me squeezing the end of her fingers. She likes sex to be a bit more animalistic. Or, you know what, she's really getting into me stroking the undersides of her arms. This is telling me that she likes more sensuous sex. So immediately you're getting really useful feedback loops. Okay, second key erogenous zones that you might not have thought of are the hips and the knees. So if a woman is sat down and you're sat opposite her, a great thing you can do is actually you can just pull her knees in towards you. Even pulling the chair a bit along the floor is great. If she stood up, holding your hands firmly on her hip and pulling her in so that she's in closer proximity with you, that immediately feels much, much more sexual. We have like these zones of proximity around our bodies where we allow people in at certain differences depending on what role they are in our lives. So it's like your boss, you don't want to get closer than a meter away from them. But if it's your woman or a woman you're sexually attracted to, you'd have her very, very close to you. So by bringing her close into your body, by having each other standing hip to hip, by having your hands on the outsides of her hips, by actually feeling her hip bones, and actually just inside a woman's hip bone, the hard bit, there's actually just that area there. I don't know if you can even see this on this video. Just on the inside of her hips, that's a really, really sexy area. So if you can use the backs of your hands to go around her back, hold the sides of her hips, and with your thumbs, my hands will be the wrong way up, they'll be kind of like pressing just on the inside of the hip. Pulling her in towards you, again, is going to start to recall that sexual experience. It's going to be sending off fireworks in her brain that will be reminding her of what it's like to have sex. So again, those sexual triggers will begin before her clothes are off. Okay, third key area, which is just her neck and her hairline. This is probably the sexiest one for women. If a woman is turned on a date with you, she'll probably be like flicking the hair around a bit, and she might do things where she's baring her neck for you, which is a sign of vulnerability. She might even begin to stroke her own neck because she's starting to feel turned on and aroused. So this whole area from the back of her hairline to her ear, to the side of her neck, to the clavicle, which is just this little bone where, hey, this little bone that leads across the top there. That's going to feel like an incredibly erotic, erogenous zone to her. So what I want you to do is, if you're kissing a woman, or if you're holding her close by and you're gazing into her eyes, get your hands to clasp the side of her head, stroke down the side of her neck. Use one finger, like your index finger, just to trace across the top of her neckline. You can even run your fingers down her lips, down her chin, and then just rest it in the middle of her clavicle and look at her with really, really heavy eye contact. All of that is, again, turning on these erogenous zones, beginning that process of where she's going to feel really romanced and really adored, but also that she's in the presence of a really sexual man. So imagine this. Imagine you have one hand that's being a bit more dominant and is maybe sliding up around the back of her hairline, and it's not over the top of the hair, it's actually underneath, sliding up around the back of her hairline, cradling her head, maybe very gently giving her hair a squeeze, pulling her in towards you, whilst this other hand is maybe touching down the side of her face, stroking her lips, touching across her clavicle, leaving your index finger to rest in the centre of her chest, making heavy eye contact. All of those signs and signals are going to start to really, really, really turn her on. Yes. So what you're going to be doing with that is you're going to be suggesting dominance, but you're also going to be muddling my words up today. You're also going to be showing off sensuality and sensual presence. You can probably see, that's probably why my words are slipping around at the moment, that even just by doing that to myself on camera, I'm starting to feel a little bit more flirtatious. It's crazy. That very primal instinct you have by somebody grabbing the back of your hair, or how sensuous and wonderful you feel by having someone just touch and graze your neck. Those are awesome, awesome, amazing experiences for a woman to have in your company, and it's going to start to really turn her on. Now we're going to, for my final tip, I'm going to kind of shift things forward. So we're not on the date anymore. All of that, those other three, with the hands, the hips, the hair, the neck, you can do that on the date. When she's in your home, another one that you can go for is you can actually pay attention to her stomach and her back. These, again, are really sexy erogenous zones. For myself personally, I'm like an athletic-ish sort of girl. Like, you know, I don't have the biggest boobs in the world, I don't have nice long legs, but I am proud of my flat stomach and my back, so actually I like to have those areas played with. Thinking about it, if it's a woman who's got really long sexy legs, that might be her legs for her. For a woman who's got really good boobs, oh, I wish I had them, that might be just the top of her chest with her bra still on. With the key area of a woman's body that she finds sexiest, I want you to spend some time kissing and savouring and really enjoying this area. So I want you to be thinking about licking or kissing down her spine, putting little kisses to the sides of her bellies, over the top of her chest, kissing or stroking down her legs, but without getting too far down. All of these things will show that you're really enjoying and admiring the woman's body, and you're allowing it to fire up. So whatever body part she's most proud of, spend some time caressing that. That means soft, subtle kisses, maybe little licks, or maybe little gentle bites if she's into it, all over her favourite area. And this area is definitely with underwear still on. I would actually say the best time to do it is when her clothes are still on. So you roll up her t-shirt, or you pull down the neckline of her t-shirt, or you slide her shoes off and you kiss all of her legs. Whatever it is, it should be something that she could do when she's still fully clothed. This means that her comfort level is going to be really good, but you're still going to have that opportunity to start turning on and exploring these key areas. So just to recap, before you even get her naked, I want you focusing on the back of her head, kissing and stroking down her clavicle and her neck, cupping her face, pulling her hair. I want you to be stroking the undersides of her arms, potentially pulling on and then maybe even gently biting the ends of her fingers, avoiding hand holding, which is too coupley, putting your hands on her hips, holding her relatively firmly, pulling her in towards you, and then really spending a lot of time caressing her favourite body part. Now, if you do that, and I mean take your time doing that, I'm thinking 10 minutes just on that one area, you're going to be really working her into the frame of mind where she's going to feel very, 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 very sexy. So try to stop thinking about sex like, oh, have I done enough? Do I have to really do this for the next 5 minutes? Then I can have sex with her. Just quit thinking like that. Quit thinking about penis and performance. Instead, I promise you the sex will be more electric, more exciting, and she's going to want loads more of it if you can just take your time, if you can focus on these key areas, and you can really turn her on. Okay, so the key difference between being that horny teenage boy lover that's just rubbish in bed, who she doesn't feel like she can stay with, where she feels strong attraction to other guys, and when she's really not getting her sexual needs satisfied, compared to the man who she has the best, most amazing sex with, who she makes a real effort sexually for and she feels deeply attracted to, is foreplay. Now, foreplay is just that window of time and sexual activity that happens before you go into full-blown penetrative sex. And it can be everything from kissing to touching to having simulated sex but with your clothes on, to using your hands or your tongue or your mouth to stimulate her. Why this is so important is, I'm going to return to that dial analogy. Women take a long time to get in the zone of wanting to have sex with you. So whilst your arousal must be very instant, for a woman, you take ages to get into the right frame of mind. Now, by talking about having sexier conversations with her, by communicating with her better during the day, by setting up the date so it's more erotic, you're going to be doing lots and lots of things to try to ensure that she starts feeling more sexual in your company and in your presence. However, we need to also make sure when the actual sexual activity starts that we're still giving her that 20 to 30 minute window to warm up. As I mentioned before, men can reach max arousal in 7 minutes, sometimes less. Women, it's 27 minutes, sometimes more. So that 20-minute difference, which is just a gender difference, you have to factor that in terms of her arousal time. I think the best and the easiest way to do this is actually just to refocus on kissing. Kissing is often massively overlooked because obviously it's not one of the more erotic activities. Again, people still have their clothes on, but for a woman, kissing can be one of the great ways that you come to and start feeling really aroused. It's something that we do a lot at the start of relationships, but actually tends to tail off during the rhythm of them. So if you've got into a funny space with your relationship where it's feeling really mundane or routine, or you're starting to feel more like friends, doing a simple thing like injecting more time into spending kissing her, or spending more time on that activity, is going to start to feel lots and lots better. So imagine this, you've just got in from a date and you lead her towards your bedroom, or you towards the sofa, or wherever other area of the house you might be in. Now, just beginning that kissing is really going to set the tone for what will happen later on sexually. Is the kissing very sensuous and slow? Is that the kind of sexual experience you're going to have? Or is it harder and deeper? Is she biting on your lip? That would again suggest a more animalistic style of sex. So when you're kissing a woman, try not to like get out of the moment and think, okay, how soon is it until I get to take her clothes off? Or when is she going to deal with this erection that I have? Instead, I want you to be concentrating on that moment and really all the sensations that are coming to you. Because by allowing a woman that 20 minutes of time to warm up to the idea of having sex with you, it means the sex with her is going to be a lot more explosive. The chances of her orgasming are going to be tons higher because her mind has gotten into the right frame where she's more open and more receptive to having sex with you. Because the problem is, and I know this, I've actually experienced this myself, if you're not consciously as a woman 110% in the moment where you're really just enjoying the sensory experience of having sex with someone, and your mind has wandered off and you haven't quite had enough time to really get into it, then there's almost like a disconnect between your mind and your body, and you stop enjoying sex as much. So with this, the kissing, if you can get lost in that process and you can devote 20 minutes to it, by the time that you've finished, not only should you feel more aroused and more connected to your partner, but she's going to feel so much more into this as well. And as I said, kissing creates these fantastic feedback loops as to the kind of sex that she wants to have with you later. So here's a few pointers on kissing technique. Now remember what I was mentioning to you in the earlier videos about how you can hold a woman and those erotic zones which you can touch when her clothes are still on, like her hips, the neck, the back of her head. You can think about her waistline as well, and the undersides of her arms and her hands. Now all of this you can incorporate when you're kissing her. You can wrap her arms around you, you can be pulling her in closely. Think about slipping your hand underneath the back of her hair, so you're holding on to the back and cradling the back of her head, stroking down the side of her neck, and then I want you to think about making very, very good eye contact as you begin the kissing. Now, especially if this is the first time you've had a really, really intense kiss with a person, you want to actually go into that relatively slowly and feel each other's kissing style out. So here's what you do. Maintain good eye contact with her, smile, look at her, and as you pull her in, just have one really gentle kiss with a closed mouth. Pull out so she's about an inch in front of you, maintaining that eye contact, then you can go back in for a deeper kiss. Think about all the different styles of kissing as well. I'm sure, well, if you're anything like me and the other people that I've been speaking to about this course, you'll remember those heady teenage years where kissing was like the best thing ever. And since then has become much less fun. I actually want you know you're going to be doing this right if you're back in that teenage zone when it comes to kissing, when you're really enjoying just holding each other closely and embracing and spending ages and ages and ages just kissing each other and sensing each other out. So experiment with your kissing style. Think about mixing up soft pecks and kisses to kisses that are focusing on pulling on her bottom or sucking on her bottom lip, maybe even gently biting her lips. Top tip, if she bites your lips, she wants to be bitten. Then as you're moving into having a more evolved kiss, thinking about holding her head and pulling it up towards yours, kissing her slowly and deeply. Move your tongue in different motions, maybe have a bit where you're exploring her mouth more deeply, inserting your tongue further in, to when you're actually just kissing her on the lips very, very, very softly and gently. Think about where else you can move with that kiss as well. Can you start kissing her down the side of her neck? Can you kiss her palm and then work down the underside of her arms? Can you pull her shirt up and kiss down the sides of her stomach? Do you want to roll her over on the bed or on the sofa and move her shirt up so you can kiss down the length of her back? Are you going to kiss down from her ankles, down the insides of her legs, walking towards her pussy and her erotic area? Or are you just going to focus on returning to that mouth kiss? Wherever you're kissing, 20 minutes. If you could do 20 minutes of kissing and you can lose yourself in that moment, if you can get to a stage where actually you're not rushing to move the sex forward because you're enjoying kissing her and holding her so much, then you know that you're going to be giving the appropriate amount of time to warm her up. Now, I know as you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, is this advice really fluffy? Isn't this a bit too romantic and sensuous? and too feminine. No, in fact, women would love guys to be more sensuous, to spend ages adoring their bodies and really, really turning them on. That's not to say that you can't have edgier sex later. Later on in this course, I'm going to be happily talking to you about anal sex, aspects of BDSM, which is to do with bondage, domination, sadomasochism, which is basically a bit of power play, head, both giving and receiving, and also fingering and foreplay. But before we get to that stage, I just need you to embrace the idea of enjoying the moment. Sex is not an activity that is over and done with in 15 minutes. It's like set aside 90 minutes at least from the second you walk through the door. That's what's going to make this sexual experience incredible. That's what's going to want her to make her come back time and time again. And that's what's going to seem like a much more appealing option on a Friday night than spending loads of money going out for dinner or going out partying. So reinvest in your sexual life and you will get those dividends. It sounds silly, but also if your sex life is suffering as a couple and there's a big sexual disconnect going on and you're living together and the romance is lost, sometimes doing nothing but spending 20 minutes kissing each other every day is enough to bring that spark back up and re-engage with those teenage feelings of falling really heavily in lust with someone. So one take-home idea that I want you to think about is employing that, spending 20 minutes to kiss and really getting involved in that motion before you then move on to the other activities that are coming later. Okay, so here is my golden rule for the rest of the sex that and sexual advice you're going to receive in this course. The golden rule is she comes first, which means, yep, she has her orgasm before you have your orgasm. So often when a man and woman are engaging with one another sexually, once a man has an orgasm, it's like sex has ended. It's like the official end of sex. And as a woman, if you're just beginning that process of becoming aroused, or maybe you've been having sex and you're getting more turned on during the process of it, that male orgasm can actually be annoying because you want the experience to last longer. So it's really great etiquette if you allow her to orgasm first and you actually start to rejiggle with the emphasis of your sex, so it's more based around her. Why it's good for her to come first is because if a woman has an orgasm already before penetration, the chances of her orgasming when you're inside of her are going to be much better, because once you've come once, as a lady, it's easier for you then to come again. You're going to be more aroused and more turned on and more relaxed. So often getting her to that space where she's already come first is very, very important. It means that the sex is going to be better, she's going to be wetter, she's going to be enjoying the activity more, she's going to be getting more into it. You'll feel like a porn god as well, because she'll be coming lots when you're actually having sex with her, instead of engaging her sexually when she's not really ready to go there. Also, as a kind of mark of sexual etiquette, to me, if a man is focused on a woman's orgasm first, he comes across like a more experienced lover, like a man who knows about women, who understands how they work, and so is working with a very female sexuality. So how you might want to think about this in terms of you reorganising things is, say you've just got in through the door. After you've spent some time kissing, I want you to lead her to wherever you're going to have sex with her. Now, let's not be limited here. Sometimes on the floor is hot. Sometimes if she's on a chair or a sofa, also hot. Halfway up the stairs, great. Or in the bedroom. I want you to take her by her hand and guide her to where you want her to be. Then I want you, either guide her to sit down on the bed, on the chair, on the floor, or to tell her and instruct her to lie down. Often when a woman receives a command like this, it feels very, very sexy, because it taps into that really primeval part of our nature, which makes us want to submit to the right guy. From here, I want you to spend time on taking her clothes off. As you're undressing her, you can keep up the kissing that we spoke about in the last chapter, and you can really develop that so you're kissing and caressing her all over her body. If the sex is more animalistic and she's, grinding up against you, is biting your lips and is giving off the indication that she's feeling much more sexual, then this is a great opportunity for you to gently pin her down onto the bed, which means you take her wrists and you put your weight on her slightly in a non-scary way so that she's got cactus arms on the bed. From here, you can take time unbuttoning her shirt taking off her trousers, and spend ages and ages in that undressing process. Again, this taps into a woman's sexual fantasies and allows her to start getting more and more engaged with the idea of having sex with you. Next steps is going to be all about that female orgasm, and I've got a few ideas about how you might go about that before we actually get into the tips of showing you technically what to do. So to think about it this way, all women respond to different things, so it can be a bit of a nightmare because what will turn one woman on and what she'll really enjoy will vary a lot compared to another woman. So don't ever be afraid to ask for feedback. Sometimes if you're performing oral sex or you're touching her, and you say, what do you like? Or is this good? Do you like me to stroke this way? Or is that better for you? Ask, and get that feedback, because a woman knows her own body. So don't be afraid. It won't make you sound like needy or that you don't know what you're doing. In fact, a very confident lover will be okay to ask about what his partner likes and what they enjoy. And so allow her to feed back to you on what technique and what style suits her. Also watch her body, is her body temperature raised? Has she got a pink flush coming across her chest? Is her breathing becoming shorter and heavier? Is she finding it harder to keep control of her body? Are you getting little tremors there? These are all very, very good signs that she's close to coming to an orgasm. Now, particularly if she's with your new partner and she hasn't been with you before, that can be quite a nerve-wracking or daunting experience, well, for both parties, but especially maybe for her. So if she's in that space where she's feeling uncertain, and that can actually inhibit or stop her from orgasming because she doesn't feel 100% comfortable and she's not super relaxed. A great way to get around that is that by making her come. Get her to make herself come. Yep, exactly. Tell her that you find it sexy and erotic to see a woman coming and you want her to witness her orgasm. Now, if she feels comfortable doing that, over the top of her panties, she's most likely, by using her fingers to touch her clitoris, going to be able to make herself come, because you know what? As women just like you, we've been practicing this skill all of our lives. Once she's had an orgasm for herself, not only does it give you a chance to notice what technique that she likes and what kind of movements and motions that she's into, but also once as a woman you've had an orgasm, your body becomes more supercharged and you feel much, much more sexual. Which means that when you have penetrative sex, the chances of her having an orgasm when she's with you are going to go up. Penetrative sex, the orgasm that's related to that for women is actually quite rare. Do you remember at the start of this video course when I was explaining that if all the women you've ever slept with ever have screamed their heads off and told you what an amazing lover you are, then some of them will be putting on a bit of a performance around that and they might not be being sincere? Well, this is the way that you make sure that she's sincere, because actually to come through penetration, just to have an orgasm as a woman from a man having his penis inside of you is quite difficult. You need to be really aroused and in just the right position to be able to do that. So to make sure that you're able to give her the best orgasm ever and she stands the maximum potential of orgasming with you, making sure she comes first and has an orgasm before penetration will allow the correct etiquette to make sure that that sexual experience is as pleasurable as possible. And as I said right at the start, if she's not incredibly wet, if she's not begging for you to have sex with her, if she's not grabbing onto you, if she's not getting animalistic, if she's not beginning to lose control, if she's not actually moving up towards you and grinding her body into you, if she's not making heavy eye contact and pulling you in towards her and kissing you very, very deeply, you know what? She's not turned on enough yet. So you need to refocus on this. Over the next few chapters, I'm going to be discussing aspects of foreplay, like using your tongue and using your fingers to make a woman come. And I really want you to use all of these techniques possible to make sure that when you finally have that sexual experience, it's as explosive as possible. Okay, now I want to talk to you about how you can use your hands to arouse her. So first of all, to state the obvious, and I know you're going to hate me for saying this again, but your hands don't have to go straight towards her vagina or her pussy or whatever you call it. Instead, I want you to think about how you can use your hands on all those other erogenous zones of her body. Some quick ideas for you to think about that we've kind of mentioned earlier. Hands can be used to pin a woman down, so that means in a nice way, in a way that's not too rapey, that you're holding your body weight against her. So imagine that she's lying down and her arms are out like cactuses. Either by wrapping your fingers in towards her or holding onto her wrists and putting a bit more of your body weight on her and making strong eye contact with her, that little bit of extra masculine dominance and animalistic pressure can feel really, really good. Likewise, holding a woman on her hips, like we spoke about earlier, pulling her in towards you, using your hands to stroke down the sides of her waist, and rolling her onto her front, and taking your hands so just your fingers very gently trail down her back before you then go and grab her ass. Those are going to feel like amazing, animalistic, very, very primal ways of moving her around, which will send off these triggers in her brain, which will make her start to feel really aroused. It's actually crazy. Like if, you know, a guy is touching you by grabbing you with the back of the hair, is holding onto your hips, it's kind of rolling you over and like holding and stroking down your spine, suddenly you start feeling incredibly turned on. So I'm not even sure about what the anthropological basis of this is, but I think deep down as women, those primeval gestures, whereas a man, you're being the man and you're allowing her to submit and be the woman, that will feel very, very erotic. Next, after you've maybe used your hands to move her into the position she wants and you've undressed her, you can then start to move on to her more obvious erotic areas like the breasts. Now with the breasts, again, some women will like a lot of pressure, some women not at all. So what you can do is you can begin by just moving gently, and if you're getting a positive response and she seems to be encouraged when you're touching her more firmly, then you can move on from that. All different women will have different sensitivities, and depending on the personal chemistry between you, it might be more sensuous or it might be more animalistic. So what you can begin with the breasts is you can just by stroking around the outsides of them and gently cupping them. With the nipples, you can use your thumb and your forefinger just to run around the outsides of the nipples. So you know there's like there's the pink circle of the nipple, and then there's the actual nipple. You want to spend some time tracing your finger around that and gently pulling on the ends. You can then grab her breasts more firmly. Other things that you can do is you could actually lick the ends of your fingers. So actually there's a slight sensation of coolness that comes onto her nipples as you're playing with them. You can also lick the ends of her nipples and then blow air across them. This hot to cold sensation she's going to be getting from that will start to make her feel more turned on as well. Again, the nipples are a fantastic feedback area too, because if they're really, really nice and hard, then you know that you're doing a great job and she's starting to feel really sexy and really aroused. So spend time actually on the breasts. Remember to alter your strokes between tracing your fingers very gently over the top, to squeezing and maybe pulling if she's receptive to it on the nipples, to clutching the breasts from underneath, to massaging your head and your face within them, to licking over the tops of the nipples, to licking your finger, moving it across the top of the nipple and then blowing that cold air across it. Again, think about spending 5-10 minutes on nipples. If you're doing that, you're devoting enough time to her getting really turned on. And again, try not to think about the penetration at this stage. Instead, you're going to have better sex for yourself as well if you really lose yourself in the experience and you really, really engage with her sexually. From here, you can actually move your hands down the body. Now, you might want to keep one hand on her breast and one hand will move towards her vagina as you're moving things on. Then gradually, you'll probably move both hands there down towards her. Now, with a woman, what you want to do is you want to use your hands to guide her legs into the position that you want. So sometimes if you're focusing on penetrating her using your fingers, you're going to want her to lift and raise her legs over her head. So you can actually stroke her legs upwards and hold from the backs of the legs by the ankles and push them back slightly, which will make for an angle where you can actually penetrate more deeply. If you're focusing more on the clitoris, it's going to make more sense for her to butterfly her legs open, so you can get her spread eagle by just gently moving her knees apart. Now from here, just sounds obvious, but just to be sure, you want to make sure that your nails aren't super long, so at least have a couple of nails that are clipped down, even if you play guitar or something like that, purely for the purpose of stimulating her using your fingers. Spit and saliva will work great as a natural lubricant, but I actually think it's fantastic for you to invest in a high quality lube as well. Lube just means that your fingers are going to glide more slowly and more gently over those sensitive areas like the clitoris and allow you to begin that process of stimulation in a way that's more comfortable for her before you then move on to doing activity that is more distinctly sexual. So maybe get some lube in your hands. If you use lube, or saliva, make sure you warm it up a bit by rubbing your palms together. Then from here, I want you to start focusing on the clitoris to begin with before you go in for penetration. Probably the best angles for you to do this is if she's in front of you and you're reaching down the front of her body, so your whole floor of your arm is against the front of her body, and you're massaging using your 3 middle fingers, and the 3 middle fingers are facing down with your palm upwards, just making sure I'm getting this all right. If you're actually down further below, so your head and your rest of your body is between her legs, then it might be easier for you to just use the swipe of your thumb, or to use again the flat of your hand but in this motion back and forwards over that area. Women will respond to different kinds of pressure. Some women like very, very rough touching, others will like it much more sensuous and much slower. Simplest thing to do is if it's with a new partner is to build up slowly into that. So begin with gentle strokes back and forth, and as she becomes more responsive and more receptive, you can build up the speed. Now quite often what will make a woman come is actually when she has both the clitoral and penetrative stimulation. So as you're moving your hand across her clitoris, the other hand that you have, you might want to begin to penetrate her. And again, begin by using 1 finger, then work up to 2, then 3, and then maybe 4 or more, who knows. But the idea is you have to move up slowly. So go up through the gears and listen to her body. You know, is she feeling wet? Is she feeling hot? Is she feeling turned on? If so, you can keep moving things forward. Now, as you're penetrating her using your finger or fingers, there's a couple of positions that you might want to get her body and your hand into to make sure that she stands the maximum chance of orgasm. Why a woman will come if you're using her fingers on her is there's 2 major orgasm points in her lower body. Well, in fact, there's loads. But for the purposes of keeping this relatively straightforward, we're just going to be focusing on the clitoris, which is the external orgasm, versus the G-spot or the internal orgasm. Now, the external orgasm using the clitoris, by the way, is if you imagine a woman's vaginal area. I still don't know what to call it. I'm like, should I call it a pussy or a vagina? I can't quite decide how rude I'm going to be with you guys. Where she has her labia, which are the sort of the flaps of skin that hang around it, the clitoris is that area, is like the little, how do you say it, like a sticky outy bone. It's very, very tiny, probably the size of a pea or the end of a baby fingernail that's sticking out. What you can do is you can actually use your 2 fingers to move the labia, that's her vaginal lips, apart, which will gently expose the end of her clitoris, and that's the bit that's going to feel sensitive and really, really good for her. That's the external orgasm, and it's actually the route via which most women orgasm. An internal orgasm is when you're stimulating her G-spot. Now the G-spot is actually found on the front wall of the vagina. Well, it's actually before you reach the womb, further up towards in the cervical canal. So by front wall, I mean, it's, if you can imagine, it's actually on the front of her body, so it's not towards the back. So if you have a woman's body, how you would actually do it is if you're entering her with your palm facing up, as you curl your fingers in, it will be on the top wall. That's where it is. It has a very famously spongy sensation to it, so it feels a little bit different to the rest of her vagina. It's extremely sensitive, and with right and regular pressure can make her experience a strong internal orgasm. So, okay, think about this again. We're going to work through this slowly. So I'm imagining that you've already successfully begun to give her a clitoral orgasm. You've parted her vaginal lips. You've got nice, clean hands with some lubricant on them. You're beginning to move back and forwards across her clitoris with one hand. Then you're slowly, with, again, well lubricated or with saliva on your fingers, you're beginning one by one to insert them into her vagina. And you're going to have both movements going together. So you're going to have a circular or side-to-side movement using the tops of your fingers across her clitoris, as well as inserting fingers into her vagina. Now, there's two major ways that I mentioned earlier that you can actually make her come using the G-spot and your fingers. There's two hand positions that will really help you. One is the come hither. So, you know, like that Playboy gesture where someone says, come this way, come towards me. It's literally a very similar movement to that you'll be using on her when you're trying to stimulate her sexually. So you'll have your fingers inside of her and you'll be stroking kind of back towards yourself. So if she's lying down on the bed, face up, your hand is entering her palm up, and your fingers will be kind of like very gently moving back towards you. This is usually actually, that motion of coming back towards you isn't so much from you curling your fingers, it's that you have a slight bend in the fingers, and then you're actually using your hand to move your fingers in and out of her body. That's going to be one great area that will make her feel really turned on. It will help you to stimulate that area. If you're really smart as well, you can even do it all with one hand, and as you're pulling out, you can start to get some clitoral strokes going on using your finger. The other thing that you can do is if she's, I think it's supine on the bed, basically when she's face down on the bed, you can insert your thumb inside of her. So now she's face down and butt up. I want you to spread her legs, and this time your thumb is going to be coming in, so your nail is upwards and your thumb is down. So again, you're going to be stroking exactly that same area, but instead of using your 2 or maybe 3, 4 fingers, you're going to be using the thumb instead. And it's going to be a gentle, a very, very slight gentle bend in the thumb, and moving your thumb rapidly in and out of her. When you're doing this, it might take a bit of time, but if you're doing it effectively, I would say within 5-10 minutes at maximum, she should be coming towards orgasm. If she's not, remember, this doesn't necessarily have to be anything to do with you or your lovemaking technique. Sometimes if a woman is a bit in her head, if she's not 100% relaxed in the experience, if she doesn't completely trust you yet, if you're a new partner, if you've drunk a lot of alcohol, there'll be natural barriers there to her orgasm. So don't worry about her not coming, but it's important that you have the etiquette of she goes first, because it demonstrates that you are a man and you're distinguishing yourself from that horny teenage boy by investing in her orgasm, getting her super turned on in a kind of she wants to write home to her friends about how good the sex was way. So make sure that she comes first, use your hands effectively, and in the next section I'm going to be demonstrating for you how you can also use your tongue and your mouth to give her tons of orgasms as well. Okay, so now that she's super turned on, she's orgasmed, you've discovered her clitoris, you've made her come through penetration, now I want you to think about actually penetrating her for the first time using your penis. How exciting, we're finally at the sex, yay! By this point, hopefully the sex will be amazing, by the way, because she's going to be so wet, so turned on, and so orgasmic that when you're finally inside of her, the sex will be a better experience. She'll be completely relaxed, completely in the moment, and totally with you. However, that said, of course, sex, particularly for the first time with a new partner, is a tense experience. If you've been having some arguments, if you're in a relationship and the relationship is kind of on rocky ground, again, a bit of a tense experience. So what you need to do still is still go back to those early days of dating and still treat that first penetration when you first insert your penis inside of her during the sexual act to make sure it is as hot as possible. So a few quick tips around that. Make sure that you can maintain eye contact. Eye contact is how we get the feedback loops as to whether a person is happy with what we're doing, whether they're comfortable and whether they're relaxed with that. Making eye contact with her will ensure that she's fully in that moment with you. Now, so if it's the first time you're having sex, make sure you ask, do you want me to be inside of you now? Would you like that? Because you need clear verbal thumbs up before she goes ahead with anything. Once you've got that clear verbal thumbs up from her, what you can then do is you can begin to go inside of her. Now, if you've been inside of her many times before and this is an established relationship, I still want you to take things slow. Often for a woman, the best bit of the sex is that first part where the man first enters you, because you get the full impact of his penis inside of you. So as you're entering into her, take it really slow. Consider going in for an inch and then pulling back out, and then going in and out very slowly. So you can think about the vagina as having several levels to it, and you insert for an inch, pull out, insert for 2 inches, pull out before you insert fully. This gives her a chance to get, again, fully turned on, fully used to the girth of your penis, and really, really makes the most of that first tantalizing moment when you're inside of her. Now, during the course of the sex, it's good that you obviously want to make it last as long as possible. In order to do that, it's actually good not to cycle through 1,000,001 sexual positions. In fact, as a woman, it can feel like you're with a guy who's really try hard if like every 30 seconds you're shifting around somewhere in bed. I've had female friends that have complained that guys try to have sex with them every which way each time you do it. Instead, it's usually better to stick to 1 or 2 positions per sexual act. With those 1 or 2 positions, think about what positions will benefit you when. So for instance, if you have a smaller penis, or you want to make your impact felt more, or you want to go deeper inside of her, the best positions for that are when her legs are over the head or when she's in doggy style. So with legs over the head, it's like she's in missionary position, she's lying on her back, but you elevate her legs so her legs come back onto her, and then you penetrate whilst you're holding her legs up. Likewise, if you go into a doggy style position, which could be her bent over something, whether it's a kitchen counter or a chair, it could be when she's on all fours, or it could be when she's actually lying flat on her stomach with her legs apart. That's, again, that level of penetration is going to feel really, really good to her. So that's what will also feel very, very deep. So if you actually have a larger penis, when you're in those positions, you have to be a little bit careful to not thrust too hard and too fast too soon, because that could potentially feel kind of uncomfortable. Now, those are good positions if you want to make your penetration felt more. If you want to have sex for the first time, there's nothing wrong with a missionary position. Missionary position can also be quite useful in terms of her ability to stimulate herself and bring herself to orgasm whilst you're inside of her. Remember, missionary position is when she's lying on her back with you on top of her. If you're in this position, really make the most of her body and all the opportunities it offers you. Missionary doesn't have to be boring and vanilla. Encourage her to reach down with her hand and stimulate her clitoris so that she can orgasm more freely when you're inside of her. Spend time kissing her neck, pressing her boobs and holding onto her hips, and really enjoying that sensual experience of having sex with her. Likewise, if you really want her to orgasm, the best position for that is actually girl on top, where she can control the movement and she can grind her clitoris into you, and she can use the stimulation of you to come most easily. So before you begin to have sex, you might want to bear in mind a little bit about what position will be useful in terms of whether you want more deeper or shallower penetration. Do you want the sex to feel more loving, in which case missionary would be great? Do you want it to be more animalistic? At what point doggy style would be really awesome? So when you first begin to have sex with her, try and think about it less of how many positions and how many weird and wonderful unusual ones can I get in here. Think about it again more in terms of taking your time and really enjoying all aspects to her body. You just don't want to get into that rhythm where you're just humping her, so it's like the same rhythm over and over and over again. Instead, start more slowly, see what she responds to. Have times when you're penetrating her harder and faster, times when you slow it back down again, and draw out that sexual experience so it's not just a couple of minutes or a 30-second hump. Instead, you're actually really experiencing all the sensations of having your skin touching one another, how her hair smells, holding her in towards you, and the different levels of penetration that you can enjoy. In the next section of this course, I'm actually going to be speaking to you about how you can make sex last as well, because I know that if you can make sex last, that's going to make everyone out. That's definitely going to make you feel amazing. So we're going to be speaking about how to make sex last. In the meantime, just for that initial act of penetration, the main things I want you to think about is she well lubricated? Is she turned on enough yet? Has she orgasmed? Have we spent ages on foreplay? Was this already amazing? Then when you penetrate, making the most of that first penetration by moving in slowly and then moving in repeatedly. Then after that, think about your sex position in terms of what are we going for here? Is it a more animalistic sexual act where she's going to be bent over or in a doggy style position? Do you want her to be in control and to bring herself to orgasm? At what point she should be on top? Are you wanting to have a more loving and sensuous experience with her, and one that enables you to hit most of the other erogenous zones that we've spoken about, like the neck and the breasts and the hips? If so, a missionary position is going to be best for you. So don't be try hard, don't hump, take things slowly, do 1 or 2 sexual positions max per encounter, and then really enjoy focusing on that moment and how amazing and sexy she is within it. In the next video, we'll be talking about how to make that moment last longer and longer. So now I want to tell you how you can help to make sex last, because long-lasting sex is often synonymous with really, really good sex. And I want you as well to fully enjoy and embrace that experience. Now, if you have a problem where you feel that you come too quickly, or if you're used to maybe being with a long-term partner where you're not maybe putting as much effort in as you did in the past, then spending longer on the sexual experience is going to make that better and more rich. Also remember that because women just take longer to get turned on, you're going to give her the maximum opportunity to get fully aroused when she's with you. Okay, so with that sexual positioning, if you feel like you're getting to a point where you need to come, there's a few things that you can do that will help you to prevent you orgasming. On a very simple level, often there might be something that you're doing when you're having sex with her that's really turning you on. To escape from that, sometimes shutting your eyes, holding her still or pulling her in tightly towards you so she's not moving around, breathing more deeply and taking a step back outside of the moment will help you to refocus and calm down. Another thing that you can use is something called your Kegel muscles. Now your Kegel muscles are exactly the same ones that when you need to go to the toilet, if you're going for a wee, they'll stop your flow of urine. So you can actually practice on a daily basis clenching and stopping the flow of urine and then releasing again. That's exactly the same muscles that you'll be using to stopping yourself orgasming. So putting your Kegel lock on when you're getting really, really turned on will prevent you from ejaculating quite so quickly. So if you're not practicing that as part of your everyday sexual routine, make sure you're starting to warm up those Kegel muscles so that you can keep the sexual experience lasting longer. Likewise, another thing that you can do is you can actually withdraw from her just because you've actually entered her for the first time and you're having sex with her. If you're getting super turned on and you know that sex is going to be over very quickly, sometimes actually before you orgasm, taking a step back, becoming outside of her, then go back to stimulating her using your hands or using your mouth. This won't feel disjointed for a woman. She won't be like, hey, hang on a second, give me the penis back. She'll be enjoying the fact that you're focusing on her orgasm and you're making her come. Often also if you're focused on her, naturally your arousal levels are going to start to go down, so you can rebalance and make sure you're hitting the same point of arousal as she is. This is something when it comes to controlling your arousal that you can also work on independently of when you're around a woman. A great thing for you to do is when you're masturbating, if you can think of 0 as not horny at all and 10 on a scale as orgasm, to masturbate to the point where you're at an 8 or a 9 and then to leave it and let your arousal go down to a level 3 or 4 and then to begin again will get your body used to the cycle of continuing and stretching out that sexual activity a little bit longer. So when you're with a woman, think also, apart from being really sensuously and really enjoying that experience, sometimes if something is happening too fast or faster than you'd want it to, by using your Kegel muscles, by focusing on your breath and by closing your eyes, by getting her to stop moving and wiggling around, by actually withdrawing from her and swapping up your sexual activity, all of these things can help sex last longer, just ridiculously quickly. So I want you to implement those ideas straight away if you're not doing them already, because it can be really easy, particularly in a long-term relationship or when you're with a new woman, to get excited or bored and just hump her 30 seconds, a few minutes, it's all over and you haven't really got fully involved in that sexual experience with her. As I actually mentioned at the start of this course, What you'll also find is that women become more turned on over the course of sex, right? They're going to get more and more aroused depending on how long you've been stimulating them for. So quite often, after you've actually come and you've finished having sex with her, a woman might still be really, really turned on if she hasn't come yet. In fact, the process of you having sex with her might, at that point, have made her feel the most turned on that she could do. So that could be her best point for arousal. So if she hasn't come first and you've broken the golden rule, try and make her come after you've come. Try not to see your orgasm as like the end of sex. Instead, think about it this way. You could stimulate her for another 20 or 30 minutes until such a point as you've recovered and have sex again. Great. Women love having sex multiple times within one evening or when they're staying with a guy. I want you to be that guy. So when you're stimulating her, again, after you've had sex with her and after your orgasm, think about going back to the foreplay techniques I was demonstrating, using fingers, using your mouth. Consider stroking her skin. That's going to be feeling at its most erotic and its most erogenous. And if she hasn't come, play with her until she has orgasmed. Because ideally, by the end of every sexual session, whilst the female orgasm is really like the cherry on the cake and non-essential to having really good sex, it's great to bring her close to that place at least once or twice during your sexual encounters with her. She's going to feel then really, really, really well nourished. Now, if you get to the end of your sexual act and you've had sex with her for as long as possible, you've used those couple of techniques I mentioned to keep sex lasting, you've spent some time after you've had sex with her either massaging her or stroking her or returning to that foreplay, but as the version of afterplay to make sure she's fully orgasmic and you're both completely done, you're tired. Make sure that you're a gentleman, even if you don't know the woman very well. Spend some time considering spooning her or embracing her. This is a really nice intimate thing to do at the end of sex. It's also the one thing that's going to likely to be leading towards more sex, because if a woman feels that bond and that security towards you, if she spends time relaxing in your company, she's going to feel much more receptive and open to having sex with you again. Now, if you've done that and you're holding her close to you, also remember to be a good gentleman. Sometimes she's going to have to run off right back to her apartment, or it'll be in the morning and she has to get out to work. Make sure you have a few things handy for post-sex. You know, in your bedroom cupboard, and this drawer is going to get really big by the end of this video because I'm going to get you having condoms, lubricant, mints, or some other thing to stimulate your mouth. Also in that drawer, I want you to consider having wet wipes and tissues to make sure that she can get cleaned up after she has sex. Have a towel to hand, offer for her to have a shower. All these basic things will actually make her feel a lot more comfortable with what's just gone down. Because so often I hear stories from my male clients where maybe they've gone out and they've met a woman and they've had a strong sexual connection with her, they've ended up taking her home, and then they never hear from her ever again. Quite often having sex very early on with someone will feel like too much of an intimate exposure for a woman. It will make her feel too vulnerable. Because of that, what you can do is, by making her feel really cared for and looked after, you can not only give the impression that you're of a caring, nice disposition, but you also, again, appear like that sexual adult man rather than the teenage boy. You know, be prepared, make her feel comfortable, make her feel relaxed, and then she's much more likely to return to your space, and this will lead you towards having tons more sex in the future. I'm also on this video going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the slightly more edgy or out there sexual acts. Not because you necessarily have to do them tomorrow, because not all women are going to be receptive to that, and sometimes the dynamic between you might not be right. However, I want you to have an idea about what they are and ways that you can lead into them, so that if you get the opportunity, if it turns you on as well, that you can start to incorporate it into your sexual repertoire. Because I just don't want you to have boring or vanilla or mundane or routine or awkward teenage boy sex. Instead, I want you to have that full experience as a lover, which means that a woman will walk away thinking, wow, who is that guy? I've never met a guy who sexually engaged with me like that before. So the three areas we're going to take just a very quick look at are anal sex, sex toys, and BDSM. So kind of the riskier stuff. Now with anal sex can actually be wonderful if you have a smaller penis. Some people say it's made for that. It can also feel really animalistic and kind of erotic and dirty for a woman. So there's loads of good reasons why it's fun and it's an interesting thing to engage with. However, as you can imagine, while some women out there will absolutely love it, others will feel very strongly against it. The anus even isn't naturally lubricated, so it is a lot more sensitive for her. Likewise, there's no real means for stimulation for her down there. It doesn't have the clitoris or the G-spot next to it, which means that you're going to have to do other stimulation to enable her to orgasm if you're using anal sex. However, as I said, it can feel dirty, it can feel erotic, and it can feel nice. So if she likes that and you're keen to experiment, there's just a few key rules of thumb to get there straight away. To begin with, I want you to think again, just like if you're going down on a woman, how you can move into that by gently testing out her boundaries. A good way to do this is to think about rimming her or licking her anus. Now, if you've just flinched as I've said that, you can just forget it in terms of anal sex, because you need to make that area well lubricated, which often means you're going to have to go down there using your tongue or using your hands yourself first. So you can lick her. When you're giving her head, you can move then downwards towards licking her ass as well. Important side note, don't then move back to licking her pussy, because the problem with that is there can be like a contamination of bacteria. I know that's not a very sexy thing to say, but I have to bring it up. If you don't feel comfortable licking her ass to get it well enough lubricated, you can in fact lick your thumb or your finger and start to very, very gently stimulate that area. Now, in order to do that, you want to lick your fingers and you want to just begin by going around the rim or the outside edge of her asshole. Then you'll use your smallest finger first and very, 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 very gently begin to penetrate. After that first few thrusts using your finger or whatever it might be are going to feel the most sensitive. You also want to withdraw even more carefully than what you go in using. If she seems to get into that and she's enjoying it, maybe you've got, this sounds, God, even I'm blushing, it sounds so rude. Your thumb is maybe stimulating her in her butt, maybe your fingers are stimulating her in her vagina. You could even be licking her pussy. God, you could have all three things going on. If she's getting into it, that's a great indicator that she's going to feel comfortable to move on to anal sex. If you use anal sex, the key word here is lubricant. You need loads of it and you need to go incredibly slowly. So you can't just insert like you can with a vagina because the anus doesn't have any natural lubricant. The best position she can get into is actually when she's in a doggy style position, potentially with her front half of her body down and her butt up, so that gives the maximum exposure. Now, as you're placing your penis inside of her, go in maybe just a very tiny amount, like a centimetre or so, and then withdraw. And remember, you can actually thrust a little bit more when you're inserting, and you have to be gentler when you withdraw. I don't have enough time on this particular course to go into loads of tips around anal sex, but if it's something that you want to explore, make sure you have your partner's consent, tons of lube, and you're going extremely slowly. Then it can be a hot, sexy, naughty sexual activity to add to your repertoire. Another sexual activity that you might want to think about is using sex toys. Now, I actually think sex toys are a great thing for a man to have. No, it doesn't mean that you think your penis is too small or that normal sex isn't good enough. Instead, we're talking about next levelism sex, where you're showing that you're comfortable and you're not intimidated by using sexual toys and objects. Of course, if it's the first time you have sex with a woman and you pull out a massive sex toy, she might feel a bit intimidated though. So to begin with, just like all of the other sexual activities I've been speaking to you about, I want you to find some way that you can start slow. This means that you can take the best kind of sex toy that you can take to begin opening her mind to that idea would be what's known as a bullet. A bullet is a very small, maybe an inch tall vibrator that all it does is vibrate, and it's purely for clitoris, so it's just for external use. Now, you can use that actually by holding it in your hands, and you can use that to replace just using your fingers when you're beginning to pleasure and beginning to stimulate her. If she's into that, the next step up from that would probably be to get a cock ring. Now, a cock ring is, again, a vibrating device that you actually insert over your penis, so it can give you a nice sensation too, which means in positions like missionary, where your front down and your pubic bone is on top of her clitoris also gets additional stimulation. These toys are fantastic if you are already in a relationship as well. And there's so many sex toys out there at the moment that are specifically designed for couples that are non-threatening and female friendly. In fact, I'd be very surprised if the woman you're with hasn't maybe used a sex toy herself independently in the past. So in that sexual discussion, if you're beginning to use a bullet vibrator on her, you might want to ask if she's ever used one before. Does she have a rabbit? Does she have a vibrator? If she likes it and she enjoys it, tell her that it turns you on to see her playing with herself. Again, this is going to be a fantastic lesson in discovering what she's into. And sex toys can really help to spice up a relationship and increase a woman's chances of orgasm. So look into them, whether it's as a couple looking to spice up your relationship or by having a couple more items in that sex drawer that I keep mentioning. Now, the final very quick thing that I wanted to touch on, which is actually a huge subject area, but maybe for most people they won't ever go that deep into this, is the subject of bondage, domination, sadomasochism, BDSM. Oh my gosh, does that not sound scary? I find it scary to say. In fact, in reality, rather than being like whips and chains and 50 Shades of Grey, it can just mean enjoying and experimenting a bit more with you being in a strong masculine role and her being in a strong feminine role, or actually her being dominant and you being a bit more submissive. If you're interested in this and you want to explore, one of the best and easiest ways you can move into it is by spanking and playing with her butt. Now, before you go in to penetrate her, maybe when you're in the doggy style position, you can experiment with spanking her. Again, you don't want to go right in there with a big paddle and whack her, but begin by spanking just very, very gently and slowly. Spank just using the palm of your hand. To begin with, it should be a touch that doesn't create any pain sensation. So it should just feel like you're clapping your hand. If she likes it and she's giving you all those signs that she's enjoying it, you can then move harder and harder from there. Crucially, after you've made contact with her butt, then circle your hand in a nice motion to soothe the area. This combination of pleasure and pain is what creates that really erotic and sexy dynamic. Pinning the arms, like we spoke about earlier in this video course, is also another area where you can assert some dominance, as is holding her by her ankles, as is physically maneuvering her around, grabbing the back of her hair, and even very gently, no pressure, you can even very gently put your hands around her neck, don't squeeze, or encourage her to do the same to you whilst making heavy eye contact. All of these items are just the beginnings of what makes for engaging in that power play. Now, power play between couples where you create sexual fantasies and where one partner dominates the other, or you do a combination of both, can be one of the hottest ways to spice up long-term relationships. So if you're in a rut, then I can only recommend that you encourage her to get into that realm of fantasy. Remember, women are turned on by sexual fantasies rather than sexual acts. So the key things that you need to be thinking about how you can make her relax into a space where she's able to enjoy her fantasies with you. Sometimes sexual acts like BDSM, sex toys or anal, which I only have time to kind of give like a couple of minutes mention in here, these are acts that can add a lot of variety and a lot of excitement into your sex life, but they also require a deep degree of trust with your partner. So make sure you verbally clear it with them first. Have a safe word, which is a word or a phrase that the woman can use if that she doesn't feel comfortable at any given time, or in fact that you can use if she's dominating you and you don't feel comfortable at any time. Don't pick stop, because stop that could be said in such a way that she's just getting passionate and enjoying the moment. So pick a random word like, I don't know, watermelon or something, so that if she says it, or you say it, there's a clear stop to your sexual activities. But often going to this really libidinal, animalistic space where you're okay to explore different aspects of sex together will make you bond more deeply as a couple, because so few people will have and share those experiences. If you can find a person who has the same sexual tastes as you, it's going to click the relationship together extremely strongly. So whilst what I've said in this little video might seem off the wall, consider maybe doing the preliminary activities with a trusting partner to walk into that, because these are the kind of sexual activities which take things into a completely different dimension and space. Anyway, so you have been watching Sex the Best She's Ever Had. I have spent ages talking to you about actually foreplay, and even before foreplay, how you can really turn a woman on right from the morning before she meets you, so that she's super warmed up. We spent a lot of time discussing the importance of foreplay and how you can stimulate a woman not only mentally, but using your hands and your tongue to bring her close to the point of orgasm. We've discussed the golden rule, which is that the woman comes first, and how you can really exploit that and use that to make sure the sex is as amazing as possible. We spent some time also discussing sexual positions on ways that you can handle the sexual act to make it last longer, and maybe a few notes on the freakier side of things too. What the main take-home points that I want you to focus on, if anything, from this short series of videos is that the best sex she's ever had has nothing to do with that porno stuff. It's not about how hard you can have sex with her, or how big your penis is, or doing stuff even that's slightly edgy towards her. In fact, it's all about looking for how she responds to certain things. So remember, that could either be nuzzling the front of her panties before you go in and give her head. It could be inserting your thumb or finger into her anus before you go any further down that road. It could be kissing her and noticing whether she likes you to bite her lips or kiss her in a more sensuous way. Create those feedback loops and know what really turns the woman on, because if she is very, very orgasmic and has come before you penetrate her, you're going to have a better sexual connection. She's going to be more in the moment, she's going to be more open and easy to orgasm, and she's going to walk away from that sexual experience feeling that she's actually had sex with a man who's comfortable around women, who's non-needy when it comes to sex, and who really knows what he's doing when he has a woman in front of him. If you can be that guy, she's never going to look at another guy going down the street. She's never going to feel dissatisfied or not like a woman, and she's going to want to stay with you. She's going to want to please you right back in return. She's going to want to dress up for you. She's going to want to give you orgasms, and it will actually build and strengthen the bond in your relationship, whether you're just dating or whether you're in a full-time relationship. So good luck, put all of this into practice, and please let me know how you get on. I'll try not to blush as I receive your emails. Thank you so much again for listening. Speak to you soon.